On this Monday night, an update on pandemic spending. The federal fiscal plan unveiled, billions being spent to help parents, businesses, and long-term care homes.
We will do whatever it takes to help Canadians.
How do the numbers add up? I speak with Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. Rising COVID-19 cases plus increased restrictions equals declining mental health.
We're getting angry.
The toll of pandemic stress. Plus, difficulty striking a balance.
No recovery without a she-covery.
How working mothers are now shouldering even bigger burdens. And mammoth undertaking. How Cher helped the world's loneliest elephant.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with money, what it's going to take to keep Canadian families and businesses afloat through the months ahead. The federal finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, who took over the job in August, has laid out how much will be spent to shore up the economy until this pandemic is over. Before COVID-19, Canada's deficit for 2020 was projected to be about $34 billion. By July, the government predicted it would balloon 10 times that to $343 billion. Well, now Freeland says it's likely to jump to $381 billion because $25 billion is being spent on new programs the finance minister says will set the stage for Canada's recovery. The wage subsidy is being increased. Parents of young children will get more through the Canada Child Benefit. There's help for airlines and tourism and money going to the provinces to spend on improving long-term care. The finance minister says the risks of providing too much support outweigh the risks of not spending enough. David Aiken breaks it down in our top story tonight.
Canadians should know that their federal government will be there to help them get through it, come what may.
And to do that, Ottawa will rack up monster deficits. Most of that red ink is a result of COVID-19 related support programs already in place.
We will do whatever it takes to help Canadians stay healthy, safe, and solvent. We will invest in every necessary public health measure, and we will support Canadian families and Canadian businesses in a deliberate, prudent, and effective way.
But Chrystia Freeland will add to it with some new items. For example, there will be a temporary boost to the Canada Child Benefit of up to $1,200 per child under the age of 6. This will be a means-tested benefit and available only for low and middle-income families. Ottawa will set up a new lending program for tourist businesses, airlines, hotels, and other firms hard hit by the pandemic. Loans of up to $1 million on a 10-year term at ultra-low rates will be available, all 100% backed by the government. The provinces will split an extra $1 billion, which they can use to improve long-term care facilities. And those crucial business support programs like the emergency rent subsidy and the emergency wage subsidy, well, they've been locked in until June. On top of that, the government has boosted the wage subsidy to 75% from 60%, and that rate has been locked in at least until the middle of March. Freeland's fiscal statement also lays some markers for future spending on pharmacare and childcare, but does not commit to major spending now on either of those files. But Freeland does say that starting next year, the government will put aside between $70 to $100 billion a year for 3 years in a row on economic recovery projects. Details of that spending will be announced later and would conceivably add to future deficits.
And so now, Donna, the political debate begins, and it really hinges on this question. Can we afford all this spending? Can we afford all these deficits? And quite clearly the government says yes, and you can expect that Chrystia Freeland and her cabinet colleagues will now move about the country with this message that Canada can't afford not to spend this money to get us to the other side of the pandemic. Donna?
Okay, David Aiken in Ottawa, thanks. The leader of the official opposition, Aaron O'Toole, accused the government of lacking a firm plan on vaccines and on managing the economy.
Do we have the freezers for the -70 vaccine, Mr. Speaker? A robust portfolio in 2023 doesn't help us as we enter 2021. Well, Mr. Speaker, this fall economic statement answers the question on whether there is a plan. And it answers that no, there is not.
And the Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, joins me now. Ms. Freeland, thank you so much for taking time with us today. You took over this job in the middle of a pandemic. Nothing is certain now. You don't know where the bottom is or how bad things will get. Is this a case of planning for the worst and hoping for the best?
Always, absolutely. And it's actually a great point and a great question, Donna. What we've tried to do in our fiscal projections for the nerds among your viewers is offer a couple of scenarios, including very much a worst case scenario. And we've built all of our projections on that worst case scenario because I think that that's the prudent thing to do. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
This is a startling amount of money to spend. How can you reassure Canadians that it is enough to stabilize the economy? And also, why didn't you include a fiscal anchor, put a limit or a cap on how much you'll spend?
It is a lot of money. And I want to start by assuring Canadians that I take that very, very seriously. I think the first thing that should be reassuring to all of us is that our debt servicing charges are imminently manageable. They are actually the lowest they have been in 100 years. And we are working very hard right now to push out the maturities on our debt to lock in today's low interest rates. So that would be point one. To your second question of will this be enough? It goes back to your first one, that we have really built several layers of projections, and we have built our growth plan on the basis of the most pessimistic projections. So yes, I really believe that this will be enough. Our plan is working so far. We've recovered 80% of the jobs lost at the bottom of the crisis, and I am really confident that we're going to be able to come roaring back.
And what about the fiscal anchor, putting a limit or a cap on how much you're prepared to spend?
Excellent question. And we did something very meaningful in that direction today, which is we are going to bring in something that I am calling fiscal guardrails to guide our stimulus spending. So there's a really meaningful question that Canadians should ask themselves that I will be asking myself when it comes to the growth plan. And that is, when do you know you're finished? When do you know you've done enough? The fiscal guardrails will do that, and they are very focused on jobs. So we're going to look at the rate of employment, the rate of unemployment, and hours worked in the economy. And that's going to let us know how much we need to put into our growth plan and when it's finished. And that's why we offered a range today. We said between 3 and 4% of GDP, $70 to $100 billion. And we did also say, the question of fiscal anchors is an important one. And we said today that as the economy gets back to normal, we will bring in fiscal anchors as well.
I know you don't have a crystal ball, of course, but when do you think Canadians can begin to breathe easy again? It won't be the moment a successful vaccine is approved, but I don't know, maybe in 3 to 6 months from then?
Donna, I don't have a crystal ball, but what I can say today, which I think would have been more difficult for us all to say a couple of months ago, is we know for sure this pandemic is going to end. We know for sure there are now at least 3 vaccines that have shown very good results. And Canada has an extensive portfolio of vaccines, the strongest portfolio of vaccines in the world. So what we can say for sure is, it is going to be a hard winter. And I think we need to kind of mentally fasten our seatbelts for a difficult couple of months. But the vaccines are coming. We know the pandemic will end. And we also know that thanks to really the historic support the federal government has provided, individual Canadians and Canadian businesses are in pretty good shape going into that growth plan. And we're going to provide them with a little more fuel to have real takeoff.
All right. Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland in Ottawa, thanks, and all the best to your family.
Okay, you too, Donna. Very nice to talk to you.
Mercedes Stevenson is with me now from Ottawa. Mercedes, not too many people envy Chrystia Freeland right now. Managing the country's finances in a pandemic requires going into uncharted territory. What stood out to you in this fiscal update?
Well, Donna, what stood out to me is that it looked more like a budget than a fiscal update. It was over 270 pages and very detailed on the now. It was really that focus on managing from day to day, and that is what a lot of Canadians wanted to hear. They're relying on programs they've already established that they believe they have evidence are working well to serve businesses and Canadians. They're going to refine those programs, but this is not the time for them to float the big ideas or put a lot of money into programs that they are unsure of. So you're certainly seeing them focusing in on that day-to-day, really how to get Canadians through the pandemic and then worry about what's on the other side later. It's a tough thing for the Conservatives to attack, and it gives them lots of room to negotiate with the NDP to stay in power.
Well, the Liberals got elected on promises of national child care, a national child care program, a national pharmacare program. Are those ideas on ice now?
Well, they're still in this document, but there's basically no details and no money really allocated to them. And these are two very expensive programs. Not because they're not looking at them, Donna, but because I believe they are saving their political firepower for the spring. This is what you can expect to see in the spring budget. And if the opposition then tries to bring the government down over these issues, I've certainly talked to a lot of senior Liberals who are more than willing to fight an election on them.
All right, election talk again. Mercedes Stevenson in Ottawa, thanks.
Never ends.
Key to the government's recovery plan is the availability of a safe and effective vaccine. None has been approved yet, but today there is a bit more reason for optimism. Biotech company Moderna now says the final trial results have confirmed its vaccine is 94% effective. It's now applying to the U.S. and the European Union for emergency approval.
Our best guess is that this will proceed through the first couple weeks of December, and maybe by the middle or end of December, we would hopefully have an emergency use authorization.
Health Canada said last week it's working on the same timelines for approval as the U.S. and the EU. In addition to Moderna, Canada is also reviewing vaccine candidates from Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson. The federal government has pre-ordered millions of doses from all those companies, and Canada's Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs says the first doses could arrive as early as January. As we wait for a vaccine, our best defense against the virus is continuing to limit who we come into contact with, because the virus is still spreading fast. Alberta is the worst right now. More than 1,700 new cases were reported there today, and 8 more Albertans died. More than 450 people are hospitalized with COVID, and almost 100 are in intensive care. And Alberta's chief medical officer says the numbers are nowhere near the peak. Here is the map showing active case numbers in Canada. Alberta has the most active infections, followed by Ontario, Quebec, and then Manitoba. When you break it down by population, Manitoba remains the hardest hit region per capita. As of last night, it had 670 active cases per 100,000 people. And over the last 24 hours in Manitoba, more than 340 more people tested positive. There are now a record 342 COVID-19 patients in the hospital there. That's more than triple the number of hospitalizations just 1 month ago. In the last month, 247 people in Manitoba have died of COVID-19, and that includes a child who is under the age of 10. That child died over the weekend. It's been 18 days since the entire province of Manitoba was placed under Code Red restrictions. Manitoba's top doctor says he understands people are getting tired, but says they have to stick with it, or cases and deaths will keep climbing.
Although these restrictions are very difficult, and it's been a long haul, we need these in place right now. And so we ask all Manitobans to follow them, not look ways to get around them, and for the most part, to stay home.
A small minority of Canadians don't believe the rules apply to them, and others are just tired of living by them. Mike Drolet has more on the frustrations building as the pandemic drags on.
It's hard to compete with the gusty winds of a snowstorm in rural Manitoba. Harder still with RCMP officers blocking the highway.
Let the people go to church.
The standoff between religious rights and public health ended with the minister delivering his sermon on the back of a pickup truck.
So there's no government there that can prohibit us from worshiping God. Right.
With the highest per capita COVID-19 rates in the country, the Manitoba government ordered, among other restrictions, that religious services go virtual, a similar order to one in BC that has resulted in church leaders being fined. Nationally, Canada's health relative to COVID-19 has never been worse. The number of active cases in the country has doubled in the last month, and with that has come a slew of regionally unique public policies that have left many people confused and confounded.
This is really where the rubber hits the road in terms of the tension between individuals and the public's interest. And I think it's a very challenging area in any democracy.
The rain kept protesters away from this Toronto area barbecue restaurant today, but it's been at the epicenter of a boisterous debate over how public policy is meted out. While businesses in 2 GTA regions aren't allowed to have customers enter their stores due to a lockdown, just a few streets over, a mall is thriving with massive lineups. How are Canadians dealing with all of it? Professor of Psychiatry Roger McIntyre says it's the unpredictable element of chronic stress that worries him the most.
We've got pervasive mistrust in almost every sector, in every structure of our society. What does this do? It really coarsens us. And it coarsens us in the sense that we, in fact, are acting out. We're getting angry, and you're seeing some of this being acted out.
The only solution, he believes, is getting the vaccine into the hands of Canadians and putting the pandemic behind us. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
British Columbia is reporting another major spike in cases and deaths. Over the last 3 days, more than 2,300 people in BC have tested positive and 46 more people have died. That is the biggest jump in deaths since the start of the pandemic.
These people have faces, have names, have stories, have families. If you are thinking that it may be okay to bend the rules, please remember that this virus takes lives.
In BC, a record 316 people are in the hospital with COVID-19, 75 of them in intensive care. A frightening moment on a snowy highway. Coming up, a heart-stopping collision caught on video. This terrifying moment was caught on a dash cam along a snow-covered highway in BC. That snowplow crossed into oncoming traffic and hit a truck. It's believed the plow's blade may have caught on some ice, causing it to swerve. The truck driver was injured, but not seriously. The Weather Network is forecasting a winter of extremes in most of Canada this year because the La Nina effect in the South Pacific will create a strong jet stream separating warm southern air masses from their colder northern counterparts. Newfoundland and Labrador is the only province expected to have a typical winter, so good for them. The rest of us prepare for some snowy, icy roads in the months ahead. F1 driver Romain Grosjean spoke from his hospital bed today about Sunday's terrifying crash that could have killed him.
I am okay, sort of okay. Thank you very much for all the messages.
It happened on the opening lap of Bahrain's Grand Prix. Grosjean's car appeared to pierce the barrier, split in half, and then burst into flames. He managed to walk away. He has burns to his hands and knows how lucky he is. Today, he thanked the Racing Federation for its massive strides to keep drivers safe. He believes something called the halo kept him alive, a curved titanium bar that protects the heads of drivers and was made mandatory in 2018. Ahead, the pandemic's imbalance and instability on women juggling family and finances. In Alberta, students in grades 7 to 12 return to remote learning today, and that tends to add to the stress of women who have to try to balance their jobs with having kids at home. Heather Yurix-West, herself a mother of young children, explains.
Tina Ferguson is a mother of 4. Before the pandemic, she'd care for her 2 preschool-aged kids during the day while her older 2 were at school, heading to work at a dinner theater in the evening when her husband was home. It was an arrangement that worked until COVID-19.
We were off for 6 months and then called back in September laid off again in November this year, just a few days ago.
Her husband's hours have also been reduced, and as of this week in Alberta, her older kids are back to doing school at home. CERB and now EI are helping, but this family admits they are just getting by.
We're just skating by with what we get, which we're so thankful for, don't get me wrong. We're very thankful for what we do get, but we're just skating by.
We have all been trying to save our businesses and still have to be at home parenting and homeschooling.
Tanis Dearland's travel business has been devastated by the pandemic, and outside of the CERB, she hasn't qualified for any government program so far. The newly created credit program for highly affected sectors could help, but it doesn't help with that other full-time job right now, caring for kids that are now in school online from home.
We're getting further away from recovery. The recession is getting longer and deeper because we are not doing anything fast enough about the one policy amenable lever we have to hasten recovery, which is early learning and childcare.
And for women like Ferguson, that burden comes with plenty of anxiety about what's to come, knowing that this pandemic is likely several months from being over. Heather Yurex, West Global News, Calgary.
Next, the world's loneliest elephant, now in good company, thanks to the goddess of pop.
You keep on believing.
There's some good news tonight about Kavan, known as the world's loneliest elephant. He's landed at his new home, a wildlife sanctuary in Cambodia. The singer Cher was there. She led the campaign to rescue the 36-year-old elephant from Pakistan, where he was isolated, mistreated, and had become dangerously overweight. His partner died in 2012. Well, now he's in the Cambodia Wildlife Sanctuary, where staff say he got a juicy fruitcake as a welcome and has some female neighbors to keep him company. And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is near Kersley, BC. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.